Please get a floating display if you sell prints.
Your first year full time, just send it and we'll do it all. And then we did, and then we died.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creative Confessions, where we talk about all things Artist Alley, manufacturing products as an artist, and small business advice. I'm your host, Macy, and I'm the artist and designer behind Mualcaina, a small business focused on kawaii designs. Artist Alley can be a bit of a challenge if you don't know where to start, and even so, if you do manage to get an Artist Alley table, you have to figure out how to sell and actually profit from your work amongst many other hardworking and talented artists. I'm excited to share our next guest, who has been vending all across the country in Artist Alley as a print artist and is also a fellow con vlogger. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Anna, better known as Sundrop Studios. I'd love to start out if you could share a little bit about yourself and how you started Sundrop Studios.
So my name is Anna, and I started Sundrop Studios maybe about 3 years ago. Just by posting on Instagram, kind of like everyone else, and that kind of aligns with the timeline of when the world was on lockdown. So I had a hobby. I decided to shoot my shot and open an online store, and that went pretty okay. I didn't make a ton of money, but I was doing okay. And then eventually when things started opening up again, I put myself out there. I started with small local markets. I met some really kind people and they told me about conventions. So I just went for it and I just kept going from there.
And before Sundrop Studios, what did you do prior to that, job-wise?
I was a full-time grad student. I was in school to become an art and play therapist. I really wanted to work with kids and I was getting my internship hours and all of that kind of stuff. Like when I started dipping my toes into the art world, trying to balance the two. But then I realized that I'm not completely cut out to be an art and play therapist. Maybe not in this phase of my life. So I decided to make the switch.
And do you currently do art full-time or this business?
I have been full-time for about a year and a half.
Oh, nice. Congrats.
Thanks.
And are you doing everything yourself with fulfillment and vending at conventions and all of that stuff?
I do all the background stuff by myself, but when I'm at conventions, I always bring my partner. I always have a helper at events, essentially, but everything else is pretty much just me.
And on the topic of Artist Alley, when did you first start doing conventions?
My first convention was Phoenix Fan Fusion 2022, I think. So that was 2 years ago. It's a lot bigger than most anime conventions out there. So it was a very grand experience, I would say. It was very overstimulating, but I had a lot of fun.
No, I bet. And since then, how many cons have you done since you first started?
Counting the proper Comic Cons, anime cons, and I'm also going to count the multi-day craft fairs. I've done 25 cons and 7 multi-day craft fairs, and then a ton of like single-day little events.
As of last year, you can also include like the single day events, but how many cons did you do, or cons, how many events did you do last year?
Last year we did 37.
Just
37
last
events
year?
in the whole year.
Oh my God. That's crazy. Yeah. And out of all of the events, like which one would you say was your most like successful?
Fanime. If success was defined by the financial terms, it would be Fanime for sure. That one was the first one that I broke the 5-figure milestone that I feel like a lot of artists have.
Yeah, Fanime is definitely one of the stronger conventions that I've experienced. Like I know for me, I think that was like my top 3 within like the past couple years too. So since you started, how has your approach to Artist Alley changed?
So last year, because it was my first year of just being full-time, my partner really encouraged me to just send it. Like, just do everything, put your application, you get in, we're gonna go. And then we did it. And it was so bad. like half the events are new and they're small, right? And it's just like you just want to go for the experience, or it just seems doable. But some of them are just like not worth your time. It's definitely worth it to take the time to look into events and do the research to see if it's worth going, because your time is so valuable. So especially towards the end, when we had a slew of small holiday markets and fairs and craft fairs, and on top of like all the regular bigger anime and Comic Cons, it was way too much. We were gone literally every other weekend and busy nearly every single weekend. You know, when you're going full time and this is all you have, you got to go 100%, 110%. And I have learned that that is not always worth it. And like, yeah, it's money and finances and you have to make it work. And maybe you have to sacrifice a little, but that is so unsustainable and you can't keep doing that. This year I have been very intentional with my cons. There's new local stuff that's coming up and I just can't afford the time and energy to do all of that again.
I definitely feel you on that one because last year for me was also a bit of a trial period with a lot of the events because that's when I realized like, oh, I kind of had some practice 2 years ago. And so last year I was like, okay, I want to dedicate this year to just doing as many like events as possible. And I did dedicate it to mostly like 3-day events. It was too much. And it wasn't to your extent of like 37 events, but it just felt so overwhelming, and some of them I feel like I overbooked with a lot of the night markets. While I did keep a couple of them this year, I realized like Foodieland doesn't really do so well for me yet. I think I booked like 5 and then I ended up backing out for like a few of them because it was just not great. So I feel like this year too was also my time where, okay, I need to be more intentional with the events that I sign up for. But it's also hard because, especially now that you have more like Artist Alley or like event friends, you see all these friends going to these events, and I definitely feel like the FOMO with all of that. So I just need to like, okay, it's okay that I'm not at this event. You need that rest too. So while you do offer products such as washi tape, sticker sheets, and totes, you're primarily a print artist. What print sizes do you currently offer?
Right now I have my mini size, which is a 5x7 postcard size. My normal poster size is 11x14. And then I have recently rolled out luxury line, which is a 24x36. And that is also printed on a really nice thick canvas.
Of those sizes, which one is your most popular? And on the other hand, like which one's your least popular?
The most popular for sure would be the 5x7, the postcards. They do really well because they are a digestible size, and because they're smaller, they're cheaper, so you just move more products because of that nature. They're really high quality, and I pay a little bit extra for like the nice premium textures. The poster size and then the large canvas ones sell the least, but it's always very exciting when I'm able to sell one of the big ones.
And for those 3 prices, if you don't mind sharing, like how are they priced? Like how much is like the 5x7, 11x14, and then the luxury ones?
My mini ones, 5x7s, are $10 each, 3 for $25. My medium size are $20 each. My large ones are $120. The big ones just cost so much to manufacture and bring out, so they are priced pretty accordingly. Like the cost in the big ones are just so high. But I've recently been thinking about readjusting my prices into a different bundle because what's popular for most print artists is to do a buy 2 get 1 free deal. Right now I just have like a strict monetary pricing, and then if you buy 3 then you get a slight discount.
Yeah, I see that particular deal a lot at conventions, and I'm also guilty of buying because of that deal. It's like, why would I just get 1 when it's buy 2 get 1 free? So how do you store your prints when you vend at conventions?
Okay, so for storing my prints, I actually like to put my mini prints out in the front because I like people touching them and doing a self-serve kind of system. But for the extras, because I bring a lot of stock of my mini prints because they are my most popular product, the extras I just store in a giant Tupperware in the back. And then when the stock in the front becomes low, then I just bring out another 10 postcards or something and then refill the stock in front. And then for my 11x14 prints, the ones that I have on display, those are not self-serve. The way that I store those, I put each design in a poster sleeve, and then I number it according to what's displayed on my display. I have them in the poster sleeves, and then I store all of those poster sleeves in this really nice flip open box that's like an archival museum box. It was like so expensive for no reason, but it's literally just a paper box, and I put all of the sleeves in there. That's where I keep all the stock, so then that way when someone orders it, I can just open it and then flip through all of them and then pull the posters out. And I just felt like that is the most efficient system because I see a lot of people store their prints in like cardboard boxes, and it's like vertical, and then they have these really small post-it note tabs, and they're like searching for it, or sometimes they become unstuck or they move or something, and it's just like they're like trying to do this thing with the posters and like rip it out. I think I tried that once and it was just the most inefficient thing. It just took so long per customer. And then for the large canvas prints, if I have the space, I will pre-roll each design into its own plastic sleeve. I've never had anyone order more than one. So I'll just grab the one design that they want and then just hand it to them. If I have time before the con during setup or whatever, I'll pre-roll several different designs.
So you've flown and you've driven to different events. Is it packed differently if you were to fly to events, or is it pretty much similar to how you store everything when you drive?
It is completely different. So I'm based in Arizona. We will drive to SoCal events or things in Vegas, but there's way more things in SoCal. So if we intend on driving somewhere, we just put everything in bins versus packing everything into a suitcase. And then we'll also pack like the little wagon and everything, just because the bin form factor is much easier for me. It just seems more sturdy, and I like using the bins as like mini tables behind the artist alley table so I can put the extra inventory on top. And while I'm at home, I store everything in bins already, so then it's just a matter of moving the bins into the car versus stuffing the bins into a suitcase into the car. And then obviously for flying, we're using the suitcase, so that is a very tedious aspect of Artist Alley. I hate packing.
And it's no surprise to anyone that competition in Artist Alley has increased tremendously in the past few years. How do you personally handle competition in Artist Alley?
Well, the competition comes down to like applying, right? I don't feel like there's competition when everyone is already in Artist Alley. Like if everyone's already made it your setup, I think when the con is going, I don't count my neighbors as competition or anything like that. It's everyone's style is so different. It's apples and oranges. People prefer oranges. Great, they're gonna buy oranges, right? The application process, it's just trying your best. And I am constantly polishing my portfolio. So I do have a portfolio specific website that I don't have linked anywhere. It's just listed for Artist Alley apps. And I make sure that it looks good, that the pieces that are kind of vaguely the same fandom. So I do a lot of like Ghibli art. So I make sure that they're all clumped together so it looks cohesive. I make sure that the colors meld together really well, or the pieces that I've kind of animated, like small animatics, I put together so that looks cool. Just trying to make sure that I put my best foot forward every single time is kind of what gives me confidence in myself when trying to fight out all of the other competitors who want the same spot at an Artist Alley. And I think that's so important to show pictures of your display, a small bio, like just a line, because I know they don't have a lot of time, right? Your work really needs to speak for itself. And so it's just a constant cycle of one, trying to be a more skilled artist, to making sure it looks that way. The person who's checking, like I want them to think like, oh, that's great that she made it in because her work will do well. Or I used to use my online shop as my portfolio, but like shit would go out of stock all the time. I hate the little label. It doesn't look as good. And like my photos are pretty good, but it's not the work. And I just want my work to shine on my portfolio. And if I don't make it in with my portfolio, then that just means I need to do better next time, or this wasn't the con for me, and that's okay.
But I do want to share that Mualcaina is finally on Patreon. If you're not familiar with Patreon, it is a subscription service where you can support creators in exchange for additional exclusive content. In my case, if you want even more Artist Alley advice, sneak peeks of upcoming products, and more, you can get all of that on Patreon. So if you want more exclusive content or you just want to support this channel, feel free to check out my Patreon. It is down below in the description box.
Since you brought up portfolios, you kind of touched upon some of the things that you do include in it. What are some of the basic necessary information that someone should include in their Artist Alley portfolio?
So I am very strategic with the layout of mine. When I send my portfolio for applications, the very first thing that pops up, maybe just one line of the tabs that I have. And then the very first section is definitely my artwork. Like I want it to just be a gallery and understand like this is her gallery, this is her work. And then the next section are my products. Because I'm a primarily print artist, I want my work first. And then I have all these other miscellaneous little products like stickers, washi tape, as you mentioned before, and other small stationery stuff. I have my product photos in the next section. I make sure that they look really nice, they're well edited. After that, your table display. Because I feel like artist alleys want their artist alleys to look good. So they want to pick people that put a lot of time and effort into their displays. And I think there's bonus points if it looks super branded, if it looks polished, put together. Everything is easy to see. I think on mine I have like 2 6-foot display setups and then an 8-foot table, because those are the most common sizes. I have done 10 by 10s before, but I don't feel like they are my strongest displays. And most of the time I am not going for 10 by 10 spots. So put the material that is relevant, and you don't need to go overkill. Like I have 3 solid pictures of my table display, very easy to communicate. And then the product photos, I don't have all of my products on there. I just chose the best pictures. I put maybe 1 or 2 pin designs just so they get the idea And then washi tape, I have like one picture of it or something like that. And then if I have apparel, a shirt, one picture, even though I have like 3 or 4 things of apparel. You don't need to do everything, just pick the best looking thing and put it on there.
I definitely agree with that, with not having to include every single product, because if they want to see every single product, they can go on your website. I feel like jurors, let's say assuming it's like a juror who's looking at your portfolio, they're not going to thoroughly look through your portfolio. They only have a couple seconds, so you might as well show your best work. And even with the table displays, again, same thing, like what you mentioned, you don't have to put every single table display that you've ever had. I usually just put maybe like a few, and typically it's one of like my most recent table display, and then the rest are table displays from more notable conventions in case they're like, oh, has this person done a big convention before? Because I think with Fanime, not that you have to have done a big convention, because I never did that before I did my first Fanime, but I feel like they tend to prefer that you've had some experience with having like a lot of stock for like past conventions, and like, are you able to not get overwhelmed? Because I know like in their application, right, don't they say like, oh, you need to make sure you have enough stuff for like 4 days? I feel like having that definitely proves like, okay, like this person has experience. And like, even if you don't have experience, if you don't have like an actual table display because you haven't done a con yet or an event, you can still put up just a table mock-up, like a photo of how your table would look, just so they can see how it would look in their artist alley. Or worst case, if you don't have time to do that or you don't have the space, you can just sketch a mock-up. But as long as you have some sort of example of how your table would look, I feel like helps a lot. So what are some of the challenges you've experienced in artist alley?
My biggest challenge is literally transportation. I am always maxing out my luggage with me and my partner. So we always have 4 maxed out 50-pound bags, a carry-on that's maxed out. We put both of our personal belongings in like a small duffel bag, and then we both have our backpacks that are filled with like our laptops, things that we need for work. My dream is to travel light. I wish I could, but I think this year, especially in the later cons, I'm going to start experimenting with actually shipping stuff out. I've just heard so many horror stories about people shipping their merch, and it terrifies me. Like, I remember last year at KawaiiCon, people were shipping out their merch to their hotels, and then their boxes were left out in the rain, and then they just lost like hundreds of posters. So I'm just like, I cannot deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. But I'm at the point where it's just like paper is so dense and it doesn't take up a lot of space. So it's hard to fill up these suitcases. You fill up to 50 really quick, but then you have all this empty space for it to get jostled. It would help a lot if I could just ship some of the stuff out, which is like something that I don't think a lot of people think about, but it's like logistics and kind of really behind the scenes is just getting your stuff to the event, because that's so important. If you don't have stuff, you can't sell it unless you pre-order everything, which one of my friends has had to do because her stuff never made it. So, and that's just like, I don't want to spend all that money, all that time to be there and have nothing. It would just be so heartbreaking.
I can't imagine, especially with paper products. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with prints because I've never sold prints, but just the idea that, oh, you also can't get your stuff wet. I know for me, like, okay, pins, I also don't want them to get wet, but I feel like it's so much more unforgiving with literal prints. So can you share a little bit about your decision-making process when it comes to choosing which artwork or which products to display at Artist Alley, or how you choose, like, oh, this art piece will be like higher up versus this one?
So as I was saying earlier, my mini prints, I just put all on display. I have way more mini print illustrations than I do 11 by 14s. So I'm more selective with my 11 by 14 displays. Usually 11 by 14s, I pick the illustrations that are newer. I've started phasing out a lot of my old stuff from 1 or 2 years ago. It kind of aligns with how I choose my portfolio layout as well. Like the same fandom kind of stuff I clump together. A lot of people notice like my Spirited Away print and they're like, wait, that looks like No Face. Their eyes go to the next thing and it's like, oh wait, that's Howl's and Howl's Castle and then Princess Mononoke and all that stuff. So it helps drag their eyes across visually. And then the things I like drawing, food, snacky kind of stuff too. I like to pair those together. Things that are kind of like partners. I have a soju print and I recently came out with a whiskey print. Those colors are green and amber, yellow, gold. They're very visual and kind of monochromatic prints. And so then I try to pick accessory prints to flank them that kind of complement them. It's a pattern of using mostly color and fandom to try to figure out where I want them and how I want them displayed. And then for the mini prints, if I have a 6-foot display, I actually just put everything in a small crate and then with like dividers so people can flip through them. So there's no display thought into that. For the canvas ones, that has been such a new product, so I haven't had many cons with the large canvas prints, but they are 2 feet by 3 feet, so they take up so much display space. I'll pick my most popular one or the most eye-catching ones, which is like my nighttime ghost print or my soju print, because people are like, oh my god, soju, and then they stop and like look. Like the soju one is not my favorite, but it's very eye-catching, so I'll put that on display like in the middle, or if I have the wing, so if I have my display like this, I'll have sidebars and then I'll put it on the sidebar or something.
Yeah, that's like half a table.
It's like, do I give up all this stuff for something that is eye-catching? But walking around artist alleys, the artists that do have banners have always stood out to me. The ones that have their big prints, I remember them, or I use them kind of as a landmark, because artist alley tables can look really busy, and that's not a bad thing. But when everyone's tables are so busy and very colorful and beautiful, it's a lot of details. So when someone has one solid thing, it's visually just easy to see. That's kind of been my strategy, and something that I've taken note of. Like other large artists, they have 20 plus prints, but they only display like 4, and then they have the display books of their other prints, and I also have a display book. So when that opens out, that's also like 2 feet across, which is also a lot of table space. So the precious table space is being taken up. But it's really nice to have the display book because everyone goes through and touches it and flips through it.
I like how you mentioned the way you organize your prints with all the Ghibli prints, like the drink prints and then cafe filler prints. Rather than just randomly putting it on, I feel like having it grouped that way, it's a lot easier for people who have, let's say they're just interested in Ghibli. They're gonna want to see like, oh, what else do they have that's Ghibli? And in your case, like, oh, like if you have them all together, I feel like that can also prompt them to like buy all of them if they want to. And it's just like easier to organize rather than like, where is the other Ghibli products? And like, if your print is maybe like more on the subtle end and like you couldn't see like no face immediately, it's going to be harder for them, especially when it's so overwhelming and busy in Artist Alley. I feel like that's easier if it was like much calm, but it can be like very overstimulating and they only have a couple seconds to look at your table. You want to capture their attention like immediately, because even if they do have the opportunity to come back, you don't know if they'll come back, because maybe a few tables over, they're just going to buy someone else's print and now that budget is gone. So I feel like having it very easy for them to navigate everything is more likely to prompt a sale. What made you go with a floating display over a tripod, and can you explain the difference between the two just in case someone listening does not know the difference?
So floating display is, I interpret it as like when you have your prints and you have your bars for displaying your prints to hang off of. The floating one is attached to the table. You either have arms that come out in front or behind you, and so you have this kind of cubicle of prints around you, versus a tripod display that literally uses a tripod, right? And then you have the 2 tripods, the bars, and that come on top. And that usually sits, either people push them up against the table so it kind of looks like a floating display, or it sits behind you. So you have this massive wall of prints behind you. Both are great ways of showing your work, as long as people can see your work. So that's the most important part. I used to use tripod because that's what I saw everyone do, but I quickly hated it. The footprint of a tripod is so large. Most artist alleys have a 6-foot table, and then you only have like 2 or 3 feet behind you. These tripods, for it to be stable, will take up like 2 or 3 feet in wingspan on both sides. So it's like you have no space. I have seen so many disasters where other artists are trying to pass behind you and they accidentally kick or step on your tripod legs and mute. It all comes down, or they kick it and then your wall of prints goes like. I also just don't like encroaching on other people's spaces, because when you have your tripods like this, if you want your legs to be in your space, you have to be within your space, but then your display gets smaller because the center of the pole is here. Your display space is smaller than the width of 6 feet, so you're probably losing a whole foot of display space. I used to do 12 by 18 prints, so I was very meticulous with doing 6 prints across because that's exactly 12, but then I couldn't do it with tripods, and like I would have to compensate somehow. The only pro about tripod displays, they're usually really light and compact, so easier to travel with. I have tried the flat foot displays, literally the flat foot, and then the bar comes out here. There's like 2 bars that connect the frame, but those are insanely heavy. They're more stable and they're less in other people's spaces, but I also quickly dropped that. So I go with the floating display system. Essentially the bottom is a C-clamp that you can clamp onto the table, and mine is really thick, so I've never had a problem with the table being too thick for it. My hand is the table, the C-clamp comes here, and then I tighten it, and then I have bars that are like 12 or 15 inches, and then I just screw them together, and then I just go build it from there. That way I have the foot space, I have almost my full like true 6 feet of width for the prints to hang on.
Yeah, I feel like we need to promote more floating displays, or at least like having those displays where it's just clamped to the table, because the number of times where I've almost tripped over a tripod is really irritating. And I feel like it's becoming more popular now too to have the floating display, which is nice, especially because some conventions, they actually don't allow tripod displays anymore because of that issue of space behind a table and like safety hazard. Please get a floating display if you sell prints. So you had a proxy at, I believe the con was Phoenix Fan Fusion not too long ago for the first time while you were at Fanime. Do you see yourself sending a proxy to an event again rather than being there yourself?
Absolutely. I was so lucky because a lot of my friends really wanted to go to Phoenix Fan Fusion, so I was totally down to have them run the table for me. They were very capable and great at communicating, so I would definitely tap into my circle of friends again to help me out if I ever needed it. Truly, what makes this doable is the quality of the proxy. I'm so lucky that my proxies are my friends and that they're into this nerdy culture, pop culture kind of stuff. So that helps the experience a lot. What also helped was that this first proxy event that I tried out was a local one. So I didn't have to send my friends anywhere. They were just straight from home. I could keep costs really, really low. And then moving inventory wasn't a hassle. And I was also able to set up for them before going to Fanime. So that was the coinciding event. So Phoenix Fan Fusion and Fanime. Fanime requires the artist to be there, so I went to that. But before I went, I just set everything up for Phoenix Fan Fusion so they could just come in, get the square reader up, and then just run the table. And then tear down is a lot easier. But it definitely comes down to the quality of the proxy. Obviously, you have to trust them because it's your money, but they were very capable of asking questions and asking good questions too that I hadn't even thought of. So the communication aspect is really good, but also conversational, because a lot of my other local Arizona friends were coming by and they were DMing me oh, your proxies are great.
I mean, right now I feel like I don't want to send proxies unless I have to, but when I did send a proxy last year, it was for 626 Night Market. So I was doing another convention at the same time. It was easier because it was local. I did set up the booth ahead of time and I was able to go back and help them take things down and then bring it back home, so it wasn't too much of a hassle in a way. If I was to consider an out of town thing, I don't know if I can do that because it's just so much work.
I think proxy situations are hard. I would prefer if it was a proxy local and then I had to be somewhere, but I am trying out send someone over to a travel event. I'll see how that goes. It's so much more work and you have to be way more precise with your directions, but because my first experience with my proxy was so great, I trust her to do the next travel one. So it's small and experimental. It's just an SJ made summer fair. But I would prefer to be at the con if I wasn't double dipping a weekend. I don't think there will ever be a situation where I'm sitting at home not being at a con and my friend is at a con. I think I would go unless I had very extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, I agree on that. I feel one, it's more rewarding when you're there rather than someone else selling on your behalf, especially if you're not doing an event at the same time. But also in terms of being more precise with information for your proxy. I feel for myself, if let's say I forgot hotel check-in is at this time, I'm more forgiving because it's myself and I can adapt, but it's not so forgiving, so to say, with another person because it's one, you're not there to help with whatever issues they're dealing with, and then I also don't want them to be frustrated, because for us we can be frustrated because it's our own business, but when it's with someone else and it's not that they're not emotionally invested in it, but they're not as emotionally invested in the business, I don't want to put them in that situation. And for the most part, most of them tend to be my friends, so then it's kind of also money and then friendship. It's not always a good mix. So what advice would you give to someone who may want to start vending an artist alley?
I'm going to take this from a very practical standpoint in terms of money. Some people will do artist alley for the experience, but a lot of people who are probably watching your channel or my channel are interested in potentially turning it into a lucrative side hustle or full-time thing. I would say that realistically, on your first ones, make your goal to break even. And this is like a true break even, like add up your COGS, cost of goods sold, the cost of the table, the cost of the displays, cost of transportation and food, all of the costs, and make that your financial goal. I think that is very realistic because you cannot be a business unless you make money. When you're just starting out, take it, one, of course, as a learning experience, but two, if you want a financial goal, make the break-even point your financial goal. So then the next time you can really grow your goal because you can really think in terms of profit because you have already accounted for the cost of your displays, which you don't have to pay for again. That cost has already kind of been taken care of, and then you can try to raise the bar in terms of profit or keep it the same, and then you actually end up with a little bit more money in your pocket. I would definitely become familiar with the reoccurring costs, being mindful of your COGS and the experience of different types of events too. So not just the big anime kinds, maybe try out your local cafe pop-up too. It's never a win or lose, it's a win or learn. So even if you don't hit your goal, learn from it. Like, why didn't you make your goal? Was it because the event was dead? Was it the timing of the event? Was it raining? Was your display not display enough? Like, did it not stand out enough? Were your prices too low, too high? All this other kind of stuff.
Yeah, 100% on all of that, especially with having your goal mostly be breaking even. And with that, you also shouldn't try to get into like a big anime convention, like assuming you're going into anime. Don't start out with like a big anime convention, especially with your first con, because, or first event in general, because it can be very expensive. Tables now, like Anime Impulse, maybe like $250 for 2 days, and that was still kind of expensive for a 2-day con. Now, I think Anime Impulse OC was like $400 for something, and I'm like, for 2 days? And it's like, okay, like I do okay at Anime Impulse OC. I'm not doing it this year, but like cons now are so expensive, and I feel like if you're just starting out, you need to start out with the one-day or not one-day conventions, but just one-day events, and just get your feel with that. Because if you start out with like a big convention, one, you might lose a lot of money, and like even if it's local, like two, you might be overwhelmed, you don't know what to do, there's so many things that can happen, and if you're not equipped to deal with all of those challenges, I wouldn't say it's a waste of time, but those are things that you could have learned with a smaller event where you're not going to lose a lot of money in the beginning and then work your way to a convention. And you also don't want to be overly frustrated in the beginning because like you're losing so much money that could have been avoided if you started out with a smaller local event.
Absolutely. And it's just like there are so many vloggers out here now. A handful of us are transparent about money. A lot of people will list out the costs and the expenses, especially for travel cons, are thousands of dollars. It's thousands. You're playing with thousands of dollars within a weekend. And if you're not confident that you can make back thousands, it's really difficult to survive in this industry.
Definitely. And since you brought up that you do vlog and you have your own channel, one, congrats on getting monetized recently on YouTube. Big milestone. How long have you been vlogging at cons?
So my first one was Saboten, which is Arizona's anime convention, longest one, and that was last year. It's coming up in September, almost 1 year-ish. We're a couple months short of 1 year.
I feel like you've been vlogging for longer for some reason. So what prompted you to start vlogging?
So I was introduced to conventioning from an attendee at a local market that I was doing, and I was like, okay, I just shot my shot for the Arizona local ones, Phoenix Fan Fusion and Saboten, but I didn't know anything about it. I was like, how is it different than a market? Because I have never been to a convention ever. I was on YouTube, and that's where I found your channel, and then I found Julianne's channel, Julianne Doodles Peppercut, and that was so helpful to me. I was like, oh, okay, that's great. So that has always kind of like sat in my mind. And then another thing that kind of pushed me to like pick up the camera myself was when I saw Ivy starting to do it too. So Drawn by Ivy, I think she started vlogging around the same time frame as me. Maybe almost a year or half a year or something like that. But just seeing someone who was less established on the YouTube space do it, and like she's so cute and like so good at it, just like naturally, I feel like I was like, oh gosh, she's doing so well. I'm like, I want to do it too. I've seen her and you, especially just like vlogging out in public, public, maybe just on the scene or just the camera behind the artist alley table, and just seeing a little bit of the behind the scenes kind of it just made it seem more accessible to me. And then I've seen like Julianne has become my good friend. Like she's very confident when she vlogs, and she's like walking and talking into her phone like this and just striding and strutting down the aisle. I'm just like, oh Julie, oh wait, she's vlogging. I have like the star eyes. I'm like, wow, she's doing it. Just like the examples that you guys have set for me just kind of made me feel like, okay, maybe I can do this. And I just felt like a lot of vloggers were also just from California, and I'm from Phoenix, which isn't like a super pop culture hub. I just wanted to cover Saboten, which is a primarily like locals kind of artist alley, just because it's so hard to get into that one, because Saboten is one of the few artist alleys where you can grandfather in, so it's not constant reapplication. Yeah, so there's high incentive for everyone to just keep reapplying, and it's the locals that have been here for so long. YouTube is kind of like my exit plan from cons, because I don't think I can do cons. Yeah. Okay, you know, we're on the same wavelength. I just don't think that we can do cons for the rest of our lives until we're 50 and we're ready to retire. I mean, ideally, I want to fire by 35, right?
Oh,
but, like,
me too!
It's so physically exhausting to do all of these. And then last year was such a learning thing. Like, I would not have survived doing all of those events if I didn't have my partner. And it's like, I see all of you other girls, like, who have to solo a lot of these events. And it's just like, oh my god, how are you doing this? Because I would die.
So when you go to an event, let's say with like a con vlog, do you have a plan on how your vlog will go before recording, or are you a little bit more spontaneous with it?
I am 99% spontaneous with con vlogs. I just try to pick up the camera when something interesting is happening, or as like a milestone typical con event is happening, like picking up the badges, setting up the table, or taking your first order. I'll do that stuff. So in a sense, there's kind of a formula, a plan-ish, but I just kind of like to do a little bit of like small moments. And I'm also like really into food, so I'll vlog, this is my lunch today, this is my sandwich. It's really expensive and really not good, but it's because cons are all kind of the same structure. If something comes up, or a little experience, or someone gives me a little gift or something, like I like vlogging that on the spot. And the only thing that I truly plan out was intro. So like for my Fanime one that has done really well, that was the only thing that I've ever like planned out intentionally.
I love that
this
intro.
Transition where
Oh
my
so
god,
good.
thank you. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's just like my mock-up in my living room, and then I have my hand out, and then I like move the camera down, and then it's my suitcase, and then I'm traveling to Fanime, pan back up, and then it's my table's already set up. So it's like I take the mock-up and then bring it over to Fanime, and then I just start the vlog from there. I just took the idea from like making reels, or like those really trendy TikToks and stuff where people do the transition stuff, and I was like, I'm just gonna do the most basic version of it, just pan down, pan up kind of thing. And it worked really well. So I'm just like, maybe I'll have to recycle that one, or pull more tricks from transition stuff from like reels. So
That might be your new thing for vlogs. So moving on to our speed round / miscellaneous round. For Artist Alley apps, do you prefer first come first serve, jury, or lottery?
I prefer jury, even though I know it is the most subjective thing out there, and it's not always the most fair, because jurors have biases, they have requirements, and there's a criteria that is never told. Like, we never know what the criteria is ever. But I am confident enough in my work and my photography skills, the way I present my portfolio, that it feels like I have so much more control over my chances. I present myself in a very strong way. First come, first serve is kind of like skill, but you can always be outskilled by other people who are just faster. I remember for Otakon, because the unlimited tables are first come, first serve, a lot of people got skill diffed on like the little button that they just missed. Like, I'm sure so many people beat me in terms of like typing, but I nailed that extra little button and I got in. And then people are like 15 seconds in and they didn't get in, and it's because they missed this little like pop-up thing. I'm just like, that would make me so angry.
I know in the beginning I used to think, oh, first come first serve is my favorite, and then maybe jury, and then lottery. Again, I always bring this up, like, it's so competitive. First come first serve, I feel like it's harder to get an artist alley table than it is to get concert tickets now, because like, why is it so difficult? Like, and then you miss so many little things, and then these conventions like to change their applications every year. I mean, I don't remember how Otakon was last year, but I think they changed it this year, the way first come first serve like table website was. It's so frustrating, and like everyone is different, and I'm like, okay, forget it. Jury, I think jury might be my new favorite. I just don't like it because sometimes I don't get into these conventions that are jury, so it's frustrating. But
Yes.
there is, like you
Yes.
said, there is a sense of control because, okay, you can adapt your portfolio to best show your work. And at that point, like, okay, you did all that you can do. At this point, it's for jury to decide whether you get in or not. But at least you still had a hand in it versus like first come first serve. At least first come first serve, I know right away like, oh, I didn't get in, moving on, versus like being waitlisted and then like, should I anticipate this con? I don't know. When it comes to Artist Alley, what do you invest in and what are you cheap about?
The things that I invest in for Artist Alley are my products themselves. So I try to go as high quality as I can realistically make profit back. So the mini prints, I've talked a lot about those already. The regular prints, they're just on a really nice thick cardstock. And then the canvas material itself is just like very expensive. And then the stickers, I go as high quality as I can because I like the specific feel of a matte sticker, the way that it looks, waterproof, dishwasher proof. So all that stuff, that comes at a premium. And so that's why my prices are priced at what they are. On the flip side, the other thing that I'm cheap about is place of stay. It's just like, it's a transient space. As long as the door locks, it's in an okay neighborhood, I will stay at the $50 a night Airbnb. Like I don't care if we have to share the bathroom. I don't care. You know, and it's important to pick a location that suits your situation. So because I travel to all my cons with my partner who is male presenting, like it helps a lot with security and like feeling safer because I guess strangers are less inclined to come up to you and bother you or God forbid follow you. I have the privilege of traveling with my partner and it provides sense of security, but you have to be aware of your situation and make decisions based off that. So if I were soloing as female, I would probably pay extra, of course, to be at the nearby hotel that's within quick walking distance, well lit, cameras outside, everything like that. Like that is so important. But it's like, yeah, money that I save at place of stay kind of goes into like feeding him and covering his costs and whatever. So it's kind of like the trade-off. It's important to acknowledge the situation that you're in and the realities of the world, which is really unfortunate, but it's something that you have to do, especially if you are female presenting out in the world.
I like that point. Personally, I'm not gonna go with like the Hyatt that's like next to the convention, but I'll go with like slightly nicer just because of the whole safety issue. But also with choosing hotel stay or even just like any type of stay, if you have a car and you see a hotel or whatever stay that's like a few $100s less per night, and maybe it's just like a 10-15 minute drive away and like parking like near the convention isn't like too expensive, you can go in that route. I feel like there's so much more freedom too if you have a car because you're not stranded within like the area surrounding the convention where it tends to be more expensive, and then you can choose like cheaper stays that are a little bit further back, but you're saving a lot of money. What is your controversial Artist Alley opinion?
Okay, what I'm thinking of, I don't think is controversial. It shouldn't really be controversial, but if an Artist Alley specifically outlines no proxies, do not send a proxy to that Artist Alley. This was something that I saw at Fanime.
Oh no.
I saw a table get escorted out. Somehow it was proven that that person behind the table was not the artist. When it was actually happening, it was very subtle and the staff handled it like bosses. Like it was kind of cool to see actually. I was literally across the table. I'm sitting here and then I see the staff come up to them, talk to the person, and then they essentially tell them to like, you have to leave because this is our rules. I'm assuming that's what the conversation was. And then the person just started taking down the prints. And then the four like staff members were in front like this, kind of like bouncers at a club, just like this. And I was just like, wow, that's incredible. It was really subtle. And then within like half an hour there was a waitlist artist who took over the space.
Oh, wow.
I guess circling back to the controversial take, if the con says don't have a proxy, maybe don't send a proxy. I understand if you get into two banging cons, pick and choose, because a lot of people have to pick and choose. If you think you're above the exception, it kind of grinds my gears. I have no problems with proxies at all. I used them. I have friends who are career proxies, and that's great. But be more selective with how you approach things or try to apply for the exhibitor side where it doesn't matter.
A proxy, I could not imagine like maybe they're doing well, like MomoCon was at the same time, right? Like I cannot imagine like being in like two cons where I'm like, yeah, I'll send a proxy to Fanime. Like Fanime's a good con. That's crazy. And for artists who want to break that rule, like that can easily get you blacklisted for a con. Like I would not want to get blacklisted at a con like Fanime. That is What has been your best investment in your business and why?
The best investment for my business, I would say, would be my technology. So I saved a lot of money to buy the highest tier iPad, which is my primary drawing tool, because my files can get very elaborate and many layers. And because I'm intending to print these on potentially 2 by 3 feet posters, they have to be super high quality, high res for it to look good when they're blown up. Investing in my tech has been really, really good. I also record a lot of content on my iPhone. So I choose to go with a higher tier iPhone because the camera and the functionality of the nicer camera just makes editing so much easier. Like, you don't have to do all the contrast and sharpening and this and that and for your content to look good on a screen. So it saves a lot of time when I know I can rely on the iPhone 15 in-body stabilization for vlogging when I'm like walking around and stuff. It helps a lot in post. Editing content, putting out content takes so much time that having technology that supports these things that you have to do as a business owner truly helps. And maybe it takes a year to save up the money for it. It was totally worth it for me to go ham on this one piece because it makes my life easier for the next 4 or 5 years, ideally.
100% on technology, because right now I'm running into the issue where I'm running out of storage on my iPhone. Right now I do want to use my iPhone until and basically like run it to the ground. Because I think I've had it since 2021, so maybe like a couple more years. But the next iPhone, I need is the max like 256 like gigabytes? I don't know, like just whatever is the biggest like gigabytes. That's what I want.
I think I have the 512 or something.
Oh, yeah. Next phone, because it's kind of silly. I'm at 64, so I have to I have to transfer everything to my laptop. And then I have to have like an external hard drive because my laptop's also really old. I think I've had it since 2020 and it's almost dying. I might have to buy a new laptop.
Well, I use Apple products, but I think it's criminal that they're selling laptops that are still only like 256 gigabytes because that's just not enough space anymore. It's just not.
You basically use up all that space within like a couple years. And especially with what we do, we're gonna need a lot of storage. I feel like for an everyday person, it's fine. But we're not everyday people with the way we use our technology. What is your biggest business insecurity?
So my biggest business insecurity is posting how much I make on the internet. We talked about this before, and with the circle of like con vloggers, there are some people who choose to disclose how much they make and some people who choose not to. I ended up choosing to disclose because honestly, when I do watch con vlogs, it's kind of a bonus to understand like, hey, this kind of artist with this kind of style or is also a print artist made this much at this con. It's very attractive for just an attendee or another person who's kind of in the same shoes. Expenses is not that bad because usually it's kind of consistent all the way through and everyone has generally the same expenses. But when it comes to revenue and thus profit, it feels kind of awkward, right? So I know people who do post how much they make and then they're harassed for it. But then people who don't post how much they make, they're like, why aren't you transparent about it? So it's kind of like there's no winning. But because I know that I am interested in money because this is a business, I felt like it was okay for me to share. It's also hard because like, you know, when your friends go to the same con, it's unavoidable to compare numbers. So it's like, oh, if another friend of mine is a print artist and I know that she made several thousand more than I did. It makes me feel insecure, but also we're so different and our pricings are so different and everything is just different. And if this person is incredibly talented, it's like, oh shit, I want to be like you. And so it gives me a goal of where I want to be. But that's probably my biggest insecurity at the moment, is just kind of being so transparent about money because it gets people kind of weird.
No, I feel that. I personally, I like watching your content and I like watching other people's content who do share their expenses and how much revenue they make. I personally don't do it for a lot of personal reasons. It also helps to know what type of products you sell, because naturally the reason why I make more now versus a few years ago is because I have a lot of big ticket items now. I have Ita bags that are $90. I have crew necks that are $70. For me to make let's say 1K within a certain time period, it's going to be a lot quicker because I have all of those items versus me trying to make 1K a few years ago. It's going to take time because I only had let's say the most expensive item was my $14 pins. And then if it's a 3 for $40 deal, getting that $40 to 1K, there's a bigger gap versus getting 1K with $90 items. So also having that consideration too of people's pricing, of course they're going to make this much more. And I feel like some people do also need to have that context given to them. That's also why when I was talking to Lindsay with like a past pod up, I think people assume that the revenue you make is all going to you when that's not true. Like, one, it's good that you're sharing expenses, so then people have that understanding like, oh, it can cost thousands to literally do just this one event. But also that additional profit that you're making might go to another event that you're going to be vending at, because table costs so expensive. And then that's also going into, like you said, like COGS, like the cost of goods sold. You have to restock for these conventions, and it's also better to overstock rather than to like sell everything out. Like there's so many expenses that are not confined to that particular event weekend that a lot of people do not consider. And that's also why I personally don't share how much I make, because people are going to assume like, oh, she's making so and so dollars. Like, no, it's just spread out. Like it goes to tenant rent, it goes to just everything.
Yeah, just like cost of living and everything. It's insane how much has to stay within your business account, because one, you have to pay your helpers, you have to pay yourself, you have to pay your manufacturers. Whenever I restock on stuff, it's thousands of dollars. Like you have to have thousands in your bank account to keep functioning for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then taxes on top of it, another a third-ish later, which is also thousands and thousands. So it's like you have to keep that padded and stocked. And it's like, if you have a great con, you make 10K rev, and that's like the best that you've done, you are not walking away with 10K in your pocket. You're walking away with realistically maybe like 5 or something after everything. And most con vlogs I've seen, myself included, have not included cost of goods sold into their expenses. So whatever the expenses list is, plus maybe another 10-20% of extra for the actual pure value of the costs took to make the products to sell. There's so many more factors about it, and some vloggers are very, very transparent about everything. I don't think I'll ever get to that point, but I'm fine with giving the rough like pictures of like the money coming out, the money coming in, and then do the math, and then with the knowledge of like, hey, like you said, the context. Like I'm primarily print artist, print stickers, paper goods kind of stuff. I cannot sell at super high prices. Like, yes, I have my canvas prints, but literally maybe I'll sell only a couple of those. Like that's not even $1,000 right there. And I make even less because they cost so much to make. Every artist situation is so different. And between you as a pin artist primarily, and then me as a print artist, our costs are so different. The comparison, especially between like peers, because they know how much I make, but I don't necessarily know how much they make, but it doesn't really matter if we can conclude that like, hey, it's a good con, or if I'm coming out and I'm saying, oh, this wasn't a strong con for me, but they're saying this is a really great con. I was like, oh, it makes me feel bad about myself, but it's like, of course, these are your friends and you're happy that they found the event that works really well for them.
And also with comparing it with friends, I was talking with another like artist friend. We did like the same event, and I remember we both were very disappointed with this particular event. And when she told me like how much she made that weekend, I was like, oh my god, like I would like, that's my good number. That's like my good number for a con. And I was like, okay, like this is also why you have to like consider like the comparisons, because like a good number for you might not be a good number for another person, and there's just so many things. So that's why like it helps having like some kind of, I wouldn't say expectation, but an expectation for how much you could potentially make at a convention. But at the end of the day, like you have to have your own good baseline number, and what my good baseline number might be different with your baseline number. When did you first feel successful with your business, and what does that word mean to you?
There are 2 avenues of success, because first and foremost, this is a business, the money aspect, of course. The second aspect is kind of the fulfillment, the personal feeling of feeling like you belong somewhere finally. So the first moment of success, by the first definition, by money terms, was my first convention where I did really, really well. I made more in that weekend than my partner's monthly salary. So that made me feel really, really validated that there was something to this, that I could do something long term. I think it also helped him understand, like, he's seen the potential of it, right? And he's always believed in me, even with like the small little markets and stuff, but he's been very supportive. And then he kind of went into the mindset of like, okay, your first year full time, just send it and we'll do it all. And then we did, and then we died. And it was really hard, but we did do everything. Like, we learned so much. We made a lot. We lost a ton of money too, but it was just a learning experience. But that first con where I was able to outmake him was kind of cool. My second moment was I kind of struggled with this feeling of selfishness of leaving in the mental health industry, which they need more people there, and then leaving all my kids that I was working with and all that kind of stuff. Mental health industry clearly has a lot of value in society because people just need help, and especially kids or vulnerable populations. But I wasn't in the right mental place to do that, and I was dealing with some family health things too. So all of those factors just made it very, very stressful for me. And so leaving, I felt extremely bad about myself. I was trying to just survive, and I was really happy, feeling confident in myself for the first time. I've never really put myself out there, but in Artist Alley, you have to put yourself out there. It's your work. And so it really pushed the boundaries of developing my personality, really. There's this one moment, I did one local Phoenix market, and I met this mom and her daughter, and they were just like any other customer. They were super cute, and they had a great relationship, you can just tell. And they ended up buying a couple of my prints. It was just very wholesome, and they weren't different or stand out from other customers that I've interacted with, but they were totally the perfect kind of customer. They love your work and then just appreciated it and bought it and interacted with you briefly, and then were on their way. The following year, I did the same market, and the mom came up to me. I didn't totally remember her, but she felt familiar. And then she came up and she wanted to buy one of my cafe prints. And then she was telling me, I'm so glad that you're back here. My daughter would have loved this print, but unfortunately she passed away last year. And then I was like, but I really think that she would love this one, and I'm glad that you're back. And there's a time and place to show sympathy and stuff, but it seems like she hadn't accepted her piece, or maybe they knew time was short and fleeting. But it was just so that moment, I can't believe that they chose me to be a small part of their relationship to bond over, or make a small part of their relationship special. And so it's
my eyes are watering.
The moment. Yeah. That was the moment where I just realized, hey, even though I draw kind of silly things, my intention with my brand is to draw cozy spaces. It's not always healthy to feed into escapism, but in this world, you just need peace somewhere. And if I can put it on a piece of paper, that's nice. That was incredibly meaningful to me. And that's when it clicked for me that you can find meaning in your work, in your art. It means something to someone, and that's what makes it art. If you draw fan art, you're contributing to a fandom that people love and want to represent their love for. And that's something that gets them excited about, and helping someone else in a different kind of way than, getting certified and sitting down and talking with a kid and working through their other things. Maybe I wasn't cut out for that, to help the world in that kind of sense, but I can help the world or someone in this other way.
I think there was a time where I was okay, do I really want to do this many conventions? And of course, naturally, burnout was going to happen. But I think because now that I did step back on doing so many events, I feel like I put more value in each event that I do now. My interactions too have a little bit more love and care into them, because at the time, if you're doing so many events one after another, and it didn't help that I was doing 3-day night markets, long hours and very exhausting and very strenuous, I can tell oh, I'm not putting my all in every transaction. But this time now that when I do interact with customers, I feel I'm able to put in more care and put in more attentiveness into it, because I can be more present. And I feel they also appreciate that more, because you said, you don't know what they're going through. And maybe this event that you're at is just their little, maybe escapism from whatever they're doing, or whatever's happening in their life. So are you working on any big projects or products or events that are coming up that you'd like to share?
So the next few events that I have on my roster will be Denver Fan Expo, and then I have proxies who are helping me out at SJ Made Summer Fair. They are very excited to be there because I have raved about SJ Made stuff. All the artists that are out there, I love you guys. And the organization, you guys are great too. I have some big hitters in August. I mentioned Otakon and Anime NYC, Sabo, Rose City Comic Con. And then in terms of products, I have my shop update coming ideally before August, ideally in July. The new product that I'm really excited to make are these little knit cell phone purses, mini purses, because I don't usually carry a lot when I'm out. They're knit material, and then they have my design on them. It's just really cute. I'm very excited because I haven't seen anyone else in Artist Alley make something like this. I've seen tote bags and stuff, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I hope that this is something that's fresh and new for the scene, and then on my store for anyone who follows.
That's so exciting. I remember when you would show the mock-ups. They're very cute, and I think that's great because personally I like to carry a lot of stuff. I feel I'm the overpacker, but I do have friends who probably just take out like their phone keys and like maybe not even their wallet because they have it like on their phone.
That's me.
And I feel like that's a good, yeah, that's a good option for people who don't like to carry a lot of stuff. So very excited for those.
Yes, thank you.
So I loved this conversation, and I am hoping that our audience can find it as helpful as I found it. Where can our audience find you?
On Instagram, I am at sundrop.studios. My online website is sundrop-studios.com. And then on YouTube, I am also Sundrop Studios.
Thank you again for joining us, Anna, and thank you to everyone listening in. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.